Hi everyone, my name is Joseph. Today I want to discuss Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Amongst Thieves. So that's a movie that came out in 2023, specifically March 31st, 2023. And some of the main cast was Chris Pine as Edgin Darvis, Sophia Lillis as Doric. The villain was portrayed by Daisy Head, who played Sofina. Michelle Rodriguez was Holga, the barbarian. The daughter was portrayed by Chloe Coleman, who played Kira. The paladin was portrayed by Reggie Jean Page. Excuse me if I mispronounced that. Who again portrayed Zinc. And then two more. Starting last but not least, Justice Smith as Simon the Sorcerer, and Hugh Grant as Forge Fitzwilliam. I said the names in no specific order. I'm just reading from Google. Before I continue with the discussion of the movie, I just want to give everyone an FYI about my history with Dungeons and Dragons. I don't have much history. In fact, watching this movie is what convinced me to start looking into Baldur's Gate, the video game series. I always knew that Baldur's Gate was a CRPG, but I was not really aware that it was based. I thought it was influenced by Dungeons and Dragons. I was not aware that it was based upon based in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. So that was an interesting thing to discover, and it really piqued my interest, and so I'm looking into that video game series as already stated. In fact, I actually did already download the first one, and unfortunately I made the error of trying to create my party instead of just creating one character and then meeting my companions. This is why it's always a good idea to look up tips for beginners, especially for older games. So I used about 2 hours of time creating my first party, which is comprised of a sorcerer, mage, fighter, ranger, and then I think I'm forgetting one more, but that's fine. We're here to talk about the movie. So I think the fact that the movie has encouraged me to do those actions to go beyond the movie itself is a really huge testament just to how well written the movie is. So I'm not gonna lie, I went into this movie with very low expectations. Well, I shouldn't say low expectations. I went in with just being very much neutral. I was very much aware of Dungeons and Dragons already before going into the movie. I was aware that it was a fantasy series, and I'm not a stranger to fantasy as well. I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings. I'm a big fan of The Witcher. I'm trying to think of other fantasy series. I can't think of any at the top of my mind, but with the Wheel of Time, I am starting to read that as well, and I do want to check out not Robert Jordan. I'm sorry. The popular individual who's writing fantasy right now, the one who took up the pin for Robert Jordan after he passed away, unfortunately. I can't think of his name, but everyone knows who I'm referring to. They know who I'm referring to. The Stormlight Archives, the individual who wrote that series. So, what made this movie so great, in my opinion, was right off the bat, the casting was very much well done. Before this movie, I was very much neutral about Chris Pine as an individual and an actor. I think he's the one who was in Star Trek, and I'll be frank with everyone, I'm not a big fan of, not the actor, but the character that portrays. I feel like that character, Captain Picard, I believe. I'm not well versed when it comes to Star Trek. But Picard, I believe he portrayed. I feel like not Picard. Excuse me. No, that's from Next Generation. I can't recall his name at the tip of my tongue. But I just always felt like his character, Kirk, I believe his name is Kirk, was much too arrogant. And I know that's how the original character was too, but as someone who has no nostalgia, no connection to the original Star Trek, I just didn't find the character very much endearing or very much attaching for the audience, for me specifically. So when I watched this movie, knowing that it was Chris Pine, again, I was very much neutral about his character, but I knew going in if he was typecast as being an arrogant type of character, if he was playing that kind of character, once again, that came out horribly. Let me rephrase that. If this new character, Edgar, that was portrayed by Chris Pine, was anything similar to Kirk's character, I would argue that he was typecast. And one superficially could say that Edgar's character is very much arrogant, is very much greedy. But I would argue that's just how he is superficially. That beneath that exterior is an individual who's caring, is an individual who cares not just about himself, but about his community, which involves not just friends and not just family, but friends as well. And in fact, that's actually a theme of the movie for Edgar to get to the heart of his character. Maybe I should rewatch the original the Star Trek films by J.J. Abrams, but maybe I'm being too harsh with Kirk's character. So yeah, the casting I felt like was really well done. Not just for Edgar's character. I'm gonna go back to the list of not Edgar, Edgin. I'm not used to these names, obviously, but everyone else, I really did appreciate Simon and Doric's relationship. Doric's the druid who could transform into different animals, and Simon was of course a sorcerer. Also, the paladin Zinc, he was such a fun character as well. When he was first introduced to the story, although I don't have much history with Dungeons and Dragons, I am already aware of paladins. Typically in the fantasy setting, paladin like in Fire Emblem, for example, paladins are very much professionals in their field. So I felt like they did today, being the writers did such a great job with Zink's character, and the audience felt like, wow, anything could be done with Zink's character, with him within the party, within the companions. But I love how Zink ends up removing himself from the party, because as he states, this mission is not his quest, but it's specifically the quest of the group. And I would argue more specifically for Edgen, to help rediscover why he became a Harper to begin with. Excuse me. What is a Harper? The Harper is the group that Edgen is a part of. Essentially, they're like spies. Superficially, they look like they're just bards, they're just walking around playing their lutes, singing songs, engaging with music. But in reality, they're actually keeping their ears open for conversations and discussions being made around them, especially amongst people who are of note. And they spread that information. And it seems like they also do missions as well when need be. So maybe not so much assassins, but more like, as I stated, spies and thieves when need to be. Unfortunately for Edgen's character, he wants the good life, and the Harpers, since they're more good people, and usually good people finish last, right, as that saying says, Edgen ends up becoming a thief, and because of that, the consequence is that his wife is murdered from, let me rephrase that, his wife ends up becoming murdered because the item that Edgen stole was marked by the enemies who it was stolen from. So unfortunately, it was an unintended consequence, and of course, Edgen feels like he's responsible. The relationship that he had with Hogo was very much awesome. I really do love it when movies and shows or any property has a relationship that's not romantic, that it's just a friendship. Even better yet when it's between the opposite gender, because I feel like that's not portrayed in media too often. In fact, in the show The Bear, a common consensus is that a lot of people hope that two of the protagonists, Sydney and Carmine, they end up being together. Carmen, I think his name is, excuse me, end up together. But I actually much more prefer them as just being friends. And it was cool to see how Holga was able to be so friendly with Edgen and not have any romantic tension between them. Again, they were just very much good friends, platonic parents who are helping to raise Kira. There is romance within this movie, and I think the movie does a good job of it as well. It's between Simon and Doric. I found their chemistry, their relationship to be very much adorable, and they were already attempted to go out on a date, but unfortunately Simon was just much too insecure and not confident enough. But thankfully, by the end of the movie, he does have a character arc, and not only is he more confident, but he's more sure of himself. There's no plans for a sequel, at least I'm not aware. And when the sequel was made, I would hope that the cast does return. But I wouldn't mind if they focus on, if they return just as supporting characters rather than the protagonists. But with that being said, if they did return as a protagonist, I'll be just as happy, especially if the quality of writing remains the same. The villain of the movie was twofold. As already stated, the first one was portrayed by Daisy Head with Sophina. But there's also a side villain through the character of Forge Fitzwilliam, portrayed by Hugh Grant. And he was such a fun character. I liked him at the end. He was a bit of a bumbling goofball, but the kind of goofball that's dangerous. Dangerous because of the networking that he does with the people that he engages with. And Sophina, I think it was cool how the villain was a female character, a woman. And I think that's cool because how often do we get movies and shows with women villains, female villains? Not too often, I would argue. And especially in today's time when we do get that, I would argue that unfortunately is not well written. It's a little bit too superficial, or it just doesn't make much sense in terms of the story. When I say much sense, I mean like the character's just not intimidating. How is the character going to be an imposing force against the lead cast, the protagonists? This movie, there's no issues with that. Sophina was intimidating from the very get-go, and one could tell that she had an underlying motive, and she was working with Forge because she was essentially using him. The movie does a great job of showing and telling, because Sophina never comes out and says, ha ha ha, I'm only working with you, Forge, because I'm using you. This is just a secret. It's just a useful relationship that we have, and I'm keeping my true motives a secret. So that was very well done, and I also like how we get both an ending to Sophina's character. To be frank, I guess she should be dead, but since she's a mage, a warlock, a Thayan warlock, a red mage from Thayen. I forgot the specific name. She could maybe much still be alive despite the fact she was so assertedly beat. Excuse me, I couldn't think of any wording. I've once seen the first Avengers movie, the way that the Hulk deals with Loki. I was very reminiscent of that. But they did enough where it made it unique and distinctive. It was just again reminiscent. That will probably make T.S. Eliot happy because everyone is unaware. T.S. Eliot states that creating something completely new is a waste of time. Rather, it's best to look at what's been created and use that to create newness in terms of losing that old material with a new perspective, and that's much more better than creating entirely new that's not based upon something that's been established. But yeah, would I recommend this movie? Oh, yes, I definitely would. I forgot to explain at the beginning. This is actually my second time watching the movie. The first time I watched it with a friend, not in theaters. We were just hanging out, and we watched the movie. And then the second time I watched it on my own, I was just, for whatever reason, thinking about not the film, but just thinking about Dungeons and Dragons, the series as a whole. And I think I was just browsing through Amazon Prime because I've been watching The Boys, and it was recommended for me. Not recommended, but just listed it for suggestions. I was like, oh, it's been a little bit since I've seen this movie. I feel like rewatching it, and I'm really happy that I did. The movie is 2 hours long, but it really does not feel like it's 2 hours long. It does such a great job with the pacing. With that being said, before I forget, this movie also does such a great job of making one feel like they want to explore this realm of Dungeons and Dragons. So ever since since I saw the movie the second time, I started doing some more research into the lore. So now I'm aware that the fans, the community call it the setting, the Forgotten Realms. So watching Dungeons and Dragons, the film, makes me, the viewer, really want to explore the Forgotten Realms. All the cool names that they use, like Sword Coast. Again, I'm new to Dungeons and Dragons, so if I'm not seeing the names correctly, pardon me. But the Sword Coast is actually from the actual game. There's actual settings about that, not settings, actual lore tidbit about that. Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter. When I heard that city's name, I was like, oh wow, I've heard that game series before. I was not aware that it was based upon a city, and nor was I aware it was actually based upon lore about Dungeons and Dragons. So that was just really cool to discover. Again, excuse me if I'm not pronouncing this correctly. Thurbachan Khan, the chubby, the pudgy dragon. When I first saw that the first time, I was not aware that it was actually from the lore. I thought the movie was just doing what's the term, a deconstruction of the dragon type, or the dragon stereotype from fantasy movies. One might probably think of like Smog. A dragon was hoarding. This dragon, Thurbachan, wasn't hoarding any treasure. Well, it seems like this was a vault where this location was at, so there might be treasure per se, but per se as in items that people very much have an attachment to, but there was no treasure as in golden items, chalices, and things like that. So typically when one thinks of like a dragon in the fantasy setting, the more I kind of think of like Smog from The Hobbit, who is guarding a golden hoard. But in this instance, again, the treasure that was being quote-unquote guarded, because I don't think Thurbachan was guarding the treasure. Thurbachan was just living in this environment that just so happens to contain these items that people use as a vault. Excuse me, that contains items in a location that's used as a vault. And so when the dragon first appeared, of course it has a traditional appearance, but one could tell that something's a little bit off because the head is pudgy looking, and then as he comes out from the shadows, the rest of the body appears. That was quite comical. And the movie does such a great job with the dragon's body image, not body image, sorry, body language, with the body, just using the body, just using the body of the dragon. The movie does a good job of using it with the environment. The one scene in the movie, they know what I'm referring to. A lot of rolling around and making bridges tilted, etc. So yeah, so would I recommend this movie? Yes, I really would. Even if one is not into fantasy or they're lukewarm towards fantasy, I think this has a lot for people to gravitate towards, to great relationships that's not romantic, great relationships that are romantic, the relationship between the villains that's not cooperative but rather butting heads. One is using the other one is just along for the ride. If one has no interest in Dungeons and Dragons, I would still highly recommend this movie. Again, I went in not knowing anything myself, completely unaware that even Baldur's Gate, the video game, was based in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. Again, I thought it was just based on it, like Divinity. like Pillars of Eternity. Correct me if I'm wrong, but those are games that are similar to the world of Dungeons and Dragons, but they're just, again, inspired by it, not based completely upon Dungeons and Dragons, the Forgotten Realms. So yes, thank you so much for watching / listening, everyone. I do appreciate it. Also, thank you for your patience. I know I was stumbling on my words quite often for this video. I don't know why. Maybe because it's too early in the morning for me. But again, thank you. I appreciate everyone. Have a great day and take care.